So, I just found out my wife cheated on me. Yeah, sounds pretty bad, right? Well, I decided heck it, I'll leave her. I guess my daughter had other plans because she was devastated and you will not believe what she did. I, 50 male, found out that my wife, 49, of 20 years was having an affair. I was completely hurt over this and have started divorce proceedings. Obviously, this has been hard on our 4 children, but I cannot spend the rest of my life with someone I can't trust. Before we got married, my wife's family had money and demanded I sign a prenup. I had no problem, but since then, the family money's been lost due to bad investments and lawsuits. My wife was a stay-at-home mother for the majority of our marriage. Our youngest child is 19, and because of the prenup, she can't get alimony. In short, my wife will be screwed. The only thing we own together was our house. While it is paid off, my wife won't be able to afford the upkeep or HOA fees, so she'll effectively be homeless. I have no intention of giving her any type of support for any reason. Since serving my wife's divorce papers, I've refused direct contact, as my lawyer advised. But she's now playing dirty by getting the children involved. We have 2 boys, 23 and 21, and 2 girls, 25 and 19. And my wife has been pleading with him to get me to agree to halt the divorce proceedings in favor of counseling. After I told my children that I had no interest wasting any more of my life with that woman, they've all essentially backed off except for my oldest, Christy. She's very close to her mother and cannot imagine life where her parents aren't married. Christy tells me that her mother realizes her mistake and do whatever it takes to make things right. She says that I owe it to the family to work things out. I refused and told her that it wasn't her place to make those kind of demands. Since then, the only time Christy talks to me is when she's sobbing and asking me not to destroy the family. I understand that this is hard for her and offered to pay for therapy so she can cope. But she said there wouldn't be anything to cope with if I wasn't trying to divorce her mother. Since Christy's being too emotional to act with reason and refusing therapy, I've been resolved to limit contact until after the divorce. However, my other children are saying that Christy's behavior is getting worse. Am I the a-hole for taking a step away from my daughter for a while? Okay guys, Mr. Reddito here. That was an intense story, and the question at the end, am I the a-hole for taking a step away from my daughter for a while? That's something to ponder on. OP did do a small little update and added 6 snippets of information, so let's check that out now. Alright, I read a couple of responses and I just wanted to clarify some things. Number 1. Clearly my quote, "she will effectively be homeless" comment was misinterpreted, so let me set the record straight. Because my wife and I own the house together, so as long as we sell the house and split the proceeds, she'll get something. Number 2. My wife did not give up her career to raise my children. We could have hired a nanny, but she did not want that and chose to be a stay-at-home mom for our children. Because of her family money, she was getting a monthly allowance from the estate. Plus, I paid for a housekeeper to make things easier on her. Number 3. Once my wife reached 30, she started getting a monthly allowance from the family estate. And the prenup addressed that, so I couldn't claim half. In exchange, she could get alimony. Number 4. I don't want my children to get involved in a divorce. My wife decided to do that, and even brought up the reason why as a form of preemptive strike. I only talk about the divorce when someone else brings it up, which Christy wants to do all the time. Number 5. I'm not abandoning my daughter. I'm just lowering contact with her until the divorce is finalized, because she's not letting up on trying to pressure me into taking her mom back, and refuse to go to therapy that I'll pay for. Number 6. Also, to comments asking why my wife cheated, that's a little offensive. I don't know how that changes anything or that I should care. However, the guy that she cheated on me with was younger. Looked like he could be maybe 28. So take that information and do what you will. Alright guys, Mr. Reddito here one more time. So we're going to wrap this story up with a final update that was edited in a little bit after the original post. If you're enjoying this story so far today, just remember, the best way to support the channel is simple. Just subscribe. And if you're enjoying it, show some love by smashing that like button. Here comes the update. I just wanted to say that I was very grateful for all your kind words and support and how to deal with my daughter. I decided to follow some of your advice and have scheduled a sit down with her to explain that what goes on between her mother and I is not her fault, and that I simply can't ever go back to a woman who deceived me in such a way. I told her that I tried to be as forgiving and empathetic as possible, but I will never, ever tolerate people who lie with malicious content and selfish intent, and try to cut them out of my personal life as much as possible. I was very calm when I said this and tried to be as loving as I could to my child, but it did not work. Christy ended up breaking down and again tried to get me to convince me not to divorce her mother and just forgive her. I refused and in the end went no contact with Christy for a little bit. I only spoke to her again 2 days before my daughter's, Jane's, 20th birthday, through a text message asking her to not bring up the divorce, since this was going to be the first time my wife and I would be in each other's presence since I filed. I sent the same text to her mother, and I did not hear anything from either of them. On Jane's birthday, things were a little tense and awkward, but I thought it was going good. Until my wife decided to be passive-aggressive with a speech about how good it is to have a family together during important events. Everyone saw through her crap, and my son Jack called her out on it and said that she was selfish to bring this up on Jane's birthday. Christy started defending her mother, and Jane, understandably upset, revealed that the only reason Christy was on their mother's side for reconciliation was because she did not want the fact that she not only knew about the affair, but helped her mother cover it up. There was a big fight that wasn't going to get resolved right then and there. I ended up leaving and was even more heartbroken all over again. Not only did my wife betray me, but my own daughter too. I knew she was closer to her mother than me, and I was okay with that, but this... I don't know what I did to make my eldest daughter so disloyal to me, but I'm now resolved to go full no contact with her until at least after divorce, and possibly for the rest of my life. Alright guys, that story was super intense. When I was looking over the comments, I came across someone who posted with a similar situation. It went as followed. I told my dad about my mom's affair partner when I was 4, and got yelled at by both of them for making up stories. When I was 20, my mom finally acknowledged that I was not lying. The commenter says after that, "How did your father react then?" And then the comment says, "He found out a year after I told him and forgave her. He was low self-esteem, and I bet he blamed himself for not being good enough. Then our family moved to a small town far away from where the affair partner was." Alright guys, drop your similar situations down below. You know I love reading all the comments. There's one final story on today's video, and the title is, "I don't want to help my boyfriend buy a house." This story comes complete with an update. Here it comes. I've been with Mark for 2 years now. When we got into our relationship, we discussed what we wanted, marriage and kids, but we haven't really talked about taking the next step yet. Mark's dream has been to own his own house. He's been saving up for it, but because we live in a medium to high COL city, it's not going as fast as he'd like. Yesterday, he asked me if I would consider covering rent and utilities for a year, while he aggressively saves. Frankly, I'm not 100% on board, and I told him this. I asked him if he thought about marriage, and he said that it might be too soon. I do agree, but he definitely loved me and saw a future with me. I asked him if the house would completely be in his own or if we'd buy it together. And he said it'd completely be his own because we aren't married yet, and buying a house together would be risky. Well, I asked him if he'd pay me back his share, and he said, quote, eventually. I have inherited a house from my grandmother in a high COL city, which I'm currently renting out. I don't want to lose it, and when I inherit it, Mark and I agreed that if we ever head towards marriage, he's fully on board to sign a prenup that ensures he has no claim to it. He stated that he'd include this house in the prenup because it'd be his own. Here's my problem. Mark has not done anything for my grandma's house. Neither have I. The house was in perfect condition. I rented it out within months of finalizing the inheritance, but he literally has no reason to stake a claim. But by covering rent plus utilities, I'll be providing monetary assistance to him. If we break up, I'd have lost quite a bit of money for seemingly no reason. In a way, I'd feel entitled to be a part of his house. Is that a selfish way to think? I love him, but I don't want to assume this risk, especially because our future together is not clear. I asked him if he would consider moving in with his parents and I'll find a roommate, just temporarily for a year so he could save the money. You know, this way, I would not have to spend more than I need to, and he'd achieve his goal. We can still continue our relationship, but he said I was being incredibly selfish and untrustworthy because, quote, it would be our home, not just on paper. That I clearly did not see a future with him, and now he's not talking to me. A part of me feels like this relationship is doomed. Is there a way to salvage this? Okay guys, Mr. Reddito here. So man, that was an intense start. It took a little bit of digging, but don't worry, there's a complete update for this story. Show some support for the channel and smash that like button. Here comes the update. After a few days, I proposed the following 3 things to Mark. Number 1, I'd front him the money. Instead of paying for his rent for 12 months, he needed for the down payment of his house. Number 2, he'd calculate what percentage that money would be the total cost of his house. The house he was considering were in the $500,000 range. I would own that percentage of the house. Not 50-50 or anything, just the percentage I paid for. If he pays me back within a year without any interest, I'd remove my name from the deed, and he'd own the house completely. If he doesn't pay me back within a year, he'd have to pay me whatever my percentage was worth a year down the line. If he intended on owning the house fully, otherwise, I was happy to have a 10% claim on the house forever. So basically, if I fronted him $50,000 for a $500,000 house, I'd own 10%. I'd charge him no interest for the first year. However, if he doesn't pay me back, then he'd need to pay me 10% of whatever the house was worth the next year. So if the house $600K now, he'd owe me $60K and so on. To be honest, this isn't that great of a deal because the real estate prices are nuts right now and are increasing pretty dramatically. So this is literally the worst in taking out a loan. I proposed this in the hopes that he'd decline and we'd just go back to never having discussed this at all. To my surprise, he immediately agreed and said that he'd get a lawyer to draft an agreement, even though he hadn't finalized the house. Well, okay then. He had it ready in 2 days. He was incredibly pushy about me signing it, but I wanted to review the whole thing with my lawyer, so I didn't care. Turns out, there was some super shady clause added, with my contribution being termed as a quote gift, not a loan. I'm not going into the details, but my lawyer basically said that this agreement was super problematic and would cause all sorts of issues down the line. He drafted an alternate and sent it to Mark. Mark did not sign it. He was adamant that I signed the original agreement and would not tell me why. He got increasingly angry, became even kind of violent, which was the first time, and I was very surprised/scared. He called me a jerk for not trusting him and for reducing our relationship to a transaction. After 2 whole days of this, of emotional manipulation and gaslighting, I decided that no longer trusted or cared for this man. And there was no way in hell I can continue to be in a relationship with him. So yeah, I'm out of the relationship, y'all. And my money is mine. All I can feel is peace. Yeah, this story is weird because it doesn't seem like OP benefits at all from this situation, and I think her boyfriend was a jerk to even suggest this idea. Here's one comment that kind of agrees with what I just said. The massive balls the guy has to even ask her to cover all the bills for a whole year so he can save for a house, and then to call her selfish for not wanting to do it. Yeah, it didn't make much sense to me, but let me know your opinions on this story. Throw them in the comments and we'll talk about it like always. Guys, there's only 5% of people that watch this channel subscribed. So please, do me one favor, it supports me so much. Just click that subscribe button. That's all the stories I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed them, and I'll catch you in the next one.